Hey everyone, welcome to Homes for Beginners, where I show you how to do repairs around the house yourself. In this video here I'll be showing you how to assemble a wheelbarrow along with some tips and tricks. Not all wheelbarrows come assembled, some may not have instructions, or maybe those instructions are hard to follow. There are various designs of wheelbarrows available, so assembly for yours may be slightly different. For this I'm assembling a wheelbarrow made by Rock River. This is their 6 cubic foot model. Craftsman also has the same wheelbarrow. I have found that the same wheelbarrows can be made from multiple manufacturers. The only variations are colors or logos. First is spreading out all your supplied parts, ensuring everything is there. If you find parts missing, contact the retailer where it was purchased from or the manufacturer for assistance. With some of these pressed metal brackets, sometimes the edges can be rough, which can result in a cut, just like I experienced. If you are wondering how the Shoshugi band finish is holding up on the deck, you can see it in the background here. This particular model does have instructions, so it's always good to consult with those first before the assembly process. There are 3 different lengths of carriage bolts. Make sure they are in their correct locations. All the nuts are the same, and there are larger standard head fasteners as well, which will have specific locations. There are plastic wedges which tilts the tub towards the back as the handles are angled down towards the wheel. Flip the tub on the side, then insert the bolts and align the wedges with the holes. These have some extruded plastic around the holes where the bolts go through, so you'll either have to thread them on or push them through. This will allow the bolts to stay in place, making the assembly a little easier. According to this particular model, the longest bolts will need to be installed up front and the slightly shorter versions towards the rear. When done, flip the tub over so the bottom is facing up. Next is putting the handles in place. This particular model uses steel tubing for the handles instead of wood. While they are painted on the outside, it's hard to say how well they're coated on the inside as protection against rust. As an added step, I'm using a wax rust inhibiting coating, the same spray as what is used on vehicles. This is available in an aerosol can. Mix the can accordingly, then using the straw nozzle, spray the wax coating on the inside. This can be applied through the open end and the bolt holes. It's not mandatory, but will ensure your wheelbarrow does have a long life. Once done, the handles can be installed. Ensure they are in the correct orientation. There will be fastening points for the front brace and wheel. Install the rear stands. Again, these do have one orientation as well. The bolt holes for the center brace should be facing towards the back. The left and right stand should be the same otherwise. Then install the nuts for the bolts. Don't tighten them up just yet. First is getting everything in place. We'll need the movement to align any other components. There is no washers. This uses a flange serrated nut, which is a type of lock nut that bites into the surface it's being tightened against. As added protection, I'm also applying a medium grade thread locker to the bolts. Now is the back stand brace. I have pre-applied medium grade thread locker to all the bolts. It only needs to be applied to one side, and you'll typically want to cover 2 to 3 threads. Once the nuts are threaded on, they'll move around the thread locker, and once it's dried, the nuts will be glued into place, preventing them from coming loose. There are different styles. We were specifically looking for a wheelbarrow which has a plate on the back such as this that provides a good amount of rigidity on the frame. If it only has one bar that comes across with one bolt on each side, it can make the wheelbarrow wobble from side to side, especially if you're carrying more weight. This plate gets mounted from the inside of the bracing, and you'll have one orientation. With the stands being loose, I'm able to move them around to align the bolt holes. Insert each of the bolts, thread on the nuts by hand again, and don't tighten it just yet. Again, these two have specific bolts used here. Onto the end brace. With the handle still loose, the ends will have movement to install the brace. Install the carriage bolts. I apply thread locker again, and then run the nuts in by hand. Don't tighten it just yet. Now for the axle shaft brackets. 2 bolts hold on each of these brackets. One of those bolts also has a brace for the front of the tub. This isn't a feature available on all wheelbarrows. The bolt gets installed from the bottom when it's currently in this orientation. Install the brace, push through the bolt, then the axle bracket, and finally the nut. Install the other bolt with the nut. Again, don't tighten. Insert the axle shaft onto the wheel. Some have bearings. This one uses bushings. Then install the opposite axle shaft bracket with the tub brace, same as the first one. The axle shaft brackets have dimples to prevent the shaft from pushing through, keeping it in position. These brackets also have elongated holes to allow for any adjustments so the wheel is centered with the frame. Finally is tightening the bolts. Start with the center brace first between the stands. A wrench or screwdriver, socket, and ratchet are only required for this. Tool types may vary depending on your wheelbarrow. Tighten the fasteners enough where they won't come loose, but also not to the point where you break them. Tighten up the handle bolts. Only a socket and ratchet is needed here as these are carriage bolts. The carriage bolts have a square portion under the head. When tightened, these will pull into the hole and lock into place so they won't spin. I'll show you a close-up of this in a moment. Now is the front handle bolts, which go into the tub. Tighten up the two front brace bolts. Flip the wheelbarrow over. Now is tightening up the rear bolts on the axle shaft brackets. Make sure the wheel is centered up and the brackets are pushed against the wheel. Here you can see a close-up of tightening the carriage bolt. While it's only going into a round hole, the tightening force pulls the square portion down into place. As for the front braces, the bolts are still loose, which provides some movement. Using the shorter supplied bolts, these two have thread locker applied. Insert them into the holes, align the braces, and install the nuts. Any fasteners connecting to the tub, their head should be on the inside to provide a smooth surface. Finally, finish up tightening the remaining fasteners. Now you're officially done and ready to use your wheelbarrow. As for maintenance tips, if your wheelbarrow starts to form any rust or has damaged paint, it's always a good idea to clean the area, then apply paint as a form of protection. If yours has wood handles, they can be cleaned up with sandpaper if they become rough, then apply linseed oil to preserve the wood. The bushings for the wheel can also be oiled. However, with us living in a sandy environment, it can stick to the oil, causing premature wear, so it's something I'd be hesitant on. If you found this video helpful, please don't forget to give it a like and drop a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more home DIY videos. Thank you for watching.